Ko Penny Hena Rei. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, I want to start my contribution by speaking about a well-known Māori woman, a woman by the name of Te Puea Herangi, otherwise known as Princess Te Puea. She lived by a very simple mantra, Mr. Speaker, which was ka mahi ahau, ka inoi ahau, ka moi ahau, ka mahi anō. I work hard, I pray, I sleep, I wake and repeat it all over again. She was a driven woman, a woman who, by living by that mantra, served the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. She went up and down the country, serving what we now call in Māori circles, te pauaru, te pani, me te rawakore. She served those who were impoverished, those who were in need. She did this with nothing. She did this through sweat, toil, and blood. She provided a service for Māoridom from all corners of Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I want to acknowledge her in my contribution, Mr. Speaker, because now I want to turn to her ingoa or her namesake, Te Puea Marae in Mangere. Te Puea Marae is currently picking up the slack that has been left to businesses, left to families, left to communities by this government in providing services to the most vulnerable, providing services to those most in need. Te Puea Marae over the past week, Mr. Speaker, has now received over 45 families. 45 families of varying sizes, of varying ethnicities. Māori, Pacific Island people, Pākehā people, Indian people, Asian people, Somalian people, received them all into her warmth at Te Puea Marae. They did this with absolutely nothing. They did this with no support whatsoever from this government. They do this, they come together with a sustainable plan to help these people, something that this government has failed to do. And I want to commend Te Puea Marae at this point in time, Mr. Speaker, because they're doing a fantastic job. I want to thank them. Can I take this opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to thank the many families of Tāmaki Makaurau and across Aotearoa who have given their love, money and resources to assist Te Puea Marae in providing this essential service, Mr. Speaker. Can I also make commendable mentions to Flick Electricity, who have provided free electricity to Te Puea Marae who are giving this service. Can I also acknowledge, Mr. Speaker, Maira 10 Mega, giving chest freezers to Te Puea Marae to allow them to freeze meat, because Te Puea Marae aren't just about servicing the homeless people who come into the warmth of Te Puea Marae, they're actually serious about placing them into affordable housing, giving them a platform to reach the aspirations that every whānau in New Zealand have, aspirations that this government has forgotten about. Mr. Speaker, Te Puea Marae are doing a fantastic job, and I want to acknowledge them, Huri the chairman, the whānau at Te Puea Marae, and the hundreds of volunteers who have made their way to Te Puea Marae over the past week to serve the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. What this speaks to, Mr. Speaker, is actually this country does care. And while the Speaker, who has just finished his contribution, might only make a very small mention of homelessness in this House, actually the people of New Zealand do care about other whānau. They care about families. They care about tamariki. They care about mokopuna. Why? Because in particular with our tamariki and our mokopuna, they are our future, Mr. Speaker. So what we would like to see, what we would have loved to have seen in this budget, was something that would allow those people, the most vulnerable in our society, those who are going into the warmth of Te Puea Marae today, tonight and tomorrow. We would love to see a platform for them to reach to the lofty aspirations that they currently hold for themselves, for their children and for their grandchildren. Sadly, we did not see that in this budget, Mr. Speaker. And members on this side of the House have pointed in the many holes in this particular budget. They've pointed out how it fails to meet the needs of our country at this point in time. But what's worse with that budget, Mr. Speaker, is it also fails to provide some sort of a plan for the future. because this government is simply living day by day. Short-term thinking. Policies made on the fly. Policies, despite them waxing lyrical about, we have a suite of measures, a suite of policies. Well, Mr. Speaker, in Tāmaki Makaurau, housing is a serious issue. We have not seen one coherent plan. We see them kicking people out of Tāmaki Makaurau. In fact, giving them money to leave. Giving them money to leave Tāmaki Makaurau. Go somewhere else. Take your problems elsewhere. We do not want to see it. And that's what's lacking in this budget, Mr. Speaker. Aspiration. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, we're disappointed on this side of the House because while they may try and fudge many of the numbers, the reality is this. Education, spending, not there. Health, spending, in fact, going backwards. And I can say this, Mr. Speaker, in speaking with the many constituents of Tāmaki Makaurau and across Aotearoa, New Zealand, Māori aspiration seems to be at the lowest level I've seen in many, many years. I want to speak briefly, Mr. Speaker, about te reo Māori. I love te reo Māori. I've said it many times in this House. I get excited about te reo Māori. And I fail to see how, by fudging the numbers, you can say that there's going to be over $30 million poured into te reo Māori. Well, let's be honest here.
Peter to pay Paul.
That's right. We're robbing Peter to pay Paul. And let's be serious here, Mr. Speaker. Money going to Māori television. It's not for aspiration of te reo Māori. No, it's simply capital expenditure. It's bringing Māori television up to a level playing field. That's exactly what it is. Guilt money. It's bringing Māori television up to a level playing field that has no aspiration for te reo Māori. Where's the coherent plan in the recent Māori language legislation that passed through this House? The questions are still there. Mr. Speaker, I also want to speak mention around te ture whenua Māori. This budget actually set money aside for a bill that hasn't even been passed through this House, through a bill that hasn't even heard submissions from the people and the stakeholders of that particular bill. So what does this tell us? It's a fait accompli. It tells us that processes made by that side of the House actually do not work for our people.
And 2 votes are very important.
Oh, wow. We'll talk about that very shortly, Mr. Speaker. But what message does this send to our people? It sends this message to the people. They do not care about them. They do not want to engage with them on a level playing field. They don't care what they have to say. They don't care that the legislation made in this House is going to affect them and their land holdings. Right. They're simply going to bulldoze their way to economic prosperity without the people, and that's the key. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I say this to the people sleeping in cars, garages and carports across Tāmaki Makaurau and Aotearoa, New Zealand. Mr. Speaker, Labour cares. We care about them. We have a coherent plan. We want to do the best by them to make sure, as I've already mentioned, their aspirations are met. Mr. Speaker, to my generation, to the people who are looking to buy their first home, to the people of my generation who want to have a warm, dry, safe home to raise their children and to give them the best education opportunities that this world has to offer, I say to them on this side of the House, we have a plan. Right. We want to see you in a warm, dry home for your children, for your grandchildren. Mr. Speaker, I say to the people who are struggling with health issues, we're listening. Labour and the parties on this side of the House, we're listening to you. We hear your cries. We understand the pain that you're going through because this government is not listening. We are here for you. Mr. Speaker, I say to the parents who have aspirations for their children, for the future of New Zealand. If they're serious about the future of New Zealand, they'll take a good hard look at this government and the budget that was presented to them last week and say, we don't want it. And say to this government, this isn't taking New Zealand seriously. It's not providing a platform for aspirations for the future of our country. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to just return to the mantra of Te Puea Herangi. Ka mahi ahau, ka inoi ahau, ka moi ahau, ka mahi anō. And I say to all of the whānau out there, kia kaha tātou.